Financial Argument. Follow us on YouTube.
Now, as we keep following these economic indicators, we are continually seeing the same exact pattern where the central bank, those who manipulate the economy, they're continually trying to push the economy up, and the economy, the real economy, the free economy, is trying to pull it down because basically this whole economy is based on a gigantic illusion. And what happens in the long term is that the real economy will show itself. It always has, it always will, and we're going to see it again because people can only keep an illusion alive for so long. And you can look at Enron, you can look at Bernie Madoff, you can look at many others who've tried to keep their illusion alive, but what always happens, there's some place, somehow, something always happens, and the whole thing completely falls apart. And what we're seeing is that the housing market, well, it's starting to crumble apart. Not just here in the United States, but we're starting to see it crumble apart in Canada, in Australia, throughout Europe. And here in the United States, we're seeing that since June, when we had the surprise jump in housing starts, which are now revised lower, we see that, well, July is not that good. And we're seeing that permits have plunged by negative 4.8% and negative 4.1%. So we see housing starts and permits, they have plunged. Now, once again, we can see that as they push it up, everything is being dragged back down. Now, remember, how do they keep this illusion alive? Well, we're very close to 0% interest rates. They're allowing individuals to come in and put down less than 10%. We're bringing in subprime individuals, and there are investment companies, hedge funds, who've been purchasing homes where they're able to buy thousands upon thousands of them, keep them off the market, and drive prices up. Banks are told not to go ahead and foreclose on homes, let people live there, maintain the homes, and make sure they stay off the market. This is how they've been keeping the illusion alive. Now, the majority of the plunge that we're seeing has come from multifamily starts. They've crashed by 35.2% year on year. This is the lowest since September of 2016. And what we're seeing right now is that the housing market, it has really gone nowhere. Actually, what we're seeing is that the housing starts, they are continually declining. And we're getting to that point where we're dropping below that point of where we were prior to the crash of 2008. And we can see at this time that this is really not a good sign. And this is just one of the indicators. We've seen many, many other indicators which show us that this economy is completely and utterly falling apart. Now, the Fed is out there and they are continually telling us that they really want to get inflation up. It's, so low right now, and they can't figure out how they can push inflation up. And what's very interesting is that savvy investors, they know that the US dollar loses value every year. This is really not a surprise. The CEO of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, characterized this eloquently with an analogy of musical chairs. Basically, that at some point, some asset class has to blow up. And there's an actual reason for this, because in a debt-based fiat monetary system, fresh credit needs to be created on an ongoing basis, even to pay back the interest on previous credit, or the system will just implode. Now, the Fed knows this. Bankers know this. CEOs know this. Economists know this. But they don't come out there and they tell everyone. This remains a secret. And they keep it very, very quiet. They don't want the average retail investing public to know about this. So right now, inflation is much worse than the Fed is saying. And if the Fed says inflation is 2%, then it's official. Inflation is 2%. Who is anyone to question the Fed? Does anyone say, hey, Fed, you're wrong? No, the corporate media goes along with it. The majority of the public believes it. Well, it's 2%. Even though I see prices of meat going up, even though I see prices of eggs going up, even though I see the price of milk going up, even if the cost of tuition is going up, housing prices are going up, the stock market is going up, car prices are going up. But if the Fed says that inflation is 2%, well, that's what it is. So regulators don't want investors to suspect that inflation is greater than what the Fed is saying. This allows them to continue their QE program in stealth. Now, in reality, for most people, and especially those individuals that have retired, inflation is killing their quality of life. And the everyday family, well, inflation is killing their quality of life. And I forgot to mention, we see inflation in automobile insurance, inflation in health insurance. So these are payments that you make every single month. It's not like, oh, I want to go out and buy a banana, maybe this month I'll skip. Well, insurance, especially auto insurance, is mandatory. Well, actually, so is health insurance. You get the penalty. But that is continually moving up and up and up and higher and higher. And what we're seeing right now is that they want to keep this part a secret. Because remember, wage inflation, that's stagnant. Actually, it's falling. But product inflation is moving up. And what we're seeing right now is they're trying to keep this illusion alive, even though even with inflation continually moving up, because they're trying to convince everyone that this is not happening. Now, what the Fed is doing right now, they're working with their member banks, and these member banks have a profit incentive when it comes to inflation. You see, if the banks can rip people off on a small money transfer to foreign countries, meanwhile borrowing at rock bottom rates in an inflating market like real estate stocks and the rest, it will create a new oligarch class. It will make certain individuals very, very wealthy. And this is what we've been seeing. We've been seeing inequality where the wealthy become very, very wealthy. The middle class is disappearing. The poor are getting poorer. The middle class is moving into the poor category. And this is getting worse. And again, what they're doing is they're keeping this alive through this gigantic illusion. And once again, if the U.S. government comes out and the Fed comes out and says the economy's doing well, and the corporate media is out there saying the economy's doing well, and telling everyone to look at the stock market, everyone believes that this is what's happening. Even though we have 8,000 retail stores closing, tens of thousands of people losing their jobs, less traffic into restaurants, chain restaurants are in trouble, automobile sales are declining, the subprime industry, well, they have no one left to give these loans out to, so that's reeling right now. Delinquencies are on the rise, and tax receipts for federal and state, they're falling. But if they tell you that the economy's doing well, then you must believe. And again, it's one gigantic illusion. Now, the Fed came out, and it looks like they've basically gave us a subtle warning that the debt bubble is beginning to burst. Now, of course, they're not going to come out and tell you, hey, everybody, the debt bubble has just popped. They do give you little breadcrumbs to let you know what's really happening. And most of the time, whatever they're telling you, it is the opposite. I mean, if you go back to 2008, the subprime is contained. We know it wasn't. We know that housing does fall in price. I mean, houses will decline in price. They're not forecasting a recession. Well, we've had a recession in the same year they said this. The same thing with Janet Yellen, where we're not going to see any type of financial crisis, in our lifetime. We know this is going to be the opposite. So the New York Fed has said that the average U.S. household has hit a new record for debt, surpassing the old record set at the peak of 2007 bubble. Put simply, the average U.S. household today is more in debt than back in 2007 going into 2008. So we've passed the peak of the massive debt bubble in late 2007. So think about what they just told us. They just told us, and they revealed, in not so many words, that we're in a massive debt bubble. But this is only half the story. There's another issue. So what is the other issue? Well, the New York Fed noted that there's a serious delinquency problem in regards to credit cards, and it's on the rise. Now, this is not a new development. We've been discussing this. It's been happening for 9 straight months, and this trend has not been seen since the depth of the Great Crisis in 2009. So, U.S. households are more in debt than they were in late 2007. The credit cycle is turning with delinquencies rising, just as they did in the Great Crisis of 2008. Meanwhile, stocks are at an all-time high, just like in 2008. They were hitting the 14,000 range at that point. So what happens when the markets wake up to the fact that yet another massive debt bubble is beginning to burst? I mean, we're seeing the same exact thing. It's happening all over again. But everyone is looking elsewhere. They're not looking at what's really going on. Now, we can see that Trump, he is starting the NAFTA negotiations. It would have been better if he just got rid of them, but there were certain individuals, the big club of corporations, who said you just can't get rid of it, you need to negotiate it. And I think as these negotiations go on, we might even see the end of NAFTA. But John McCain is out there. And remember, a lot of these elite, these people who've made a lot of money off of these trade deals, they don't want them to go away. And it has cost America many, many hundreds of thousands of jobs. These trade deals were never put into place to benefit the everyday person. The latest trade deal, which was completely canceled, the TPP, that was not going to help America. It wasn't going to help the everyday person, the everyday factory worker. It was going to bring in other workers from other countries, and we were going to pay them the salary that they were making in their country here in the United States. And the American worker would not be able to compete with them. This is why this trade deal was canceled. I mean, there's many other reasons. That they were going to place a court which sat above governments so they can control governments. They were going to actually take the sovereignty away from each and every one of the countries. This was the process of creating a one world government. But we can see right now, McCain, he is calling on the administration to preserve the North American Free Trade Agreement, saying that if he does this, it's going to hurt a lot of people in his district. And we're going to see a lot of senators, those individuals that are within the elite, they're going to say the same exact thing. Because remember, these bills, these laws that they push through, this is all to benefit and line their pockets with cash. It's not to benefit the people, just like Obamacare, just like all the other agreements. This was never to help the everyday person. And this is what this is all about. We want a government, we want those in government to work for the people, not to make them wealthy, not to make deals so they benefit. We want these individuals to work for, yes, us, we the people. That's why they are there. And we can see that most of these individuals, well, they're not doing it. they're not working for the people. They might say they are. I mean, they're very good at speaking. I mean, it's political talk. But their actions show something completely different. Because if they were truly working for the people, and they really wanted to benefit the American people, everything that they put into place, they would have taken on themselves. Like, for example, they wouldn't have exempted themselves from Obamacare. They would have said, listen, we are just like you. We are the people. We're going to take this health insurance. We're going to drop what we have because this new insurance is so great. But again, this didn't happen. So what we're seeing right now is that the elite, they're already starting with the threats because they don't want what they have to be taken away. And this is the beginning stages of dismantling what the elite, the deep state, the neocons, the central bank has put into place over time. And again, this is going to take some time to unravel everything because they've made it very, very difficult because you have to go through Congress, and they've done this on purpose to make sure that you just can't unwind it. And this is exactly what is happening right now. And will everything be able to be dismantled before the economy comes down? I don't think so. I think the economy right now is disintegrating very, very quickly. More and more individuals, and we can see from retail, we can see from housing, we can see from the tax revenue. I mean, all these things you really can't manipulate. The revenue and sales of corporations you can't manipulate. It's all falling apart. Yes, you can keep the illusion alive with, massaging the numbers and moving them here, putting them in this column. But eventually what happens, it all comes to an end. You can't fake it anymore. And we're approaching that period